Hi there, and welcome to this episode. Now, today we're going to talk about the family and also consider the subject, the concept of treason. And it might be the case that you have never put these two ideas together. And that is understandable because it's a kind of strange concept. When we think of treason, we think of treason against a country, our own country, for example. And at this moment in time, if you were to head to Russia and give away some secrets, if you know any secrets, and it was found out here in Britain, you would be arrested, you'd be tried, you would get a very, very heavy penalty. I think we all know that would be considered a terrible crime. Now, the death penalty in the UK was suspended, not in the UK, in Britain, I should say, was suspended in 1965, and then it was permanently stopped in 1969 for murder. Now, I say Britain because it was the 70s before it was stopped in Northern Ireland. And then in 1988, it was completely stopped, even for the crime of treason. Now, what that tells us is that crimes against the state are considered worse than crimes against the individual. So if you did something that hurt the country, that would be considered worse than murder, which is why treason was still a capital crime until 20 years after murder. And adultery, I'm going to mention adultery here, is barely even considered a crime, and it is certainly not considered important when dividing the assets after a divorce. So essentially, there are no consequences for adultery in this country. And we're going to come back to that in a minute. Now, let's contrast that with biblical standards. People often think that the Bible is old-fashioned because there are lots of crimes that have capital punishment. Now, murder is the most obvious crime, and actually I think a lot of people would like to see a return of capital punishment for murder. The Human Rights Act was what actually ended capital punishment in 1988. And I think we would probably look back from where we are now to the 80s and consider that the rights of the criminal certainly are elevated. And especially here in Scotland, where even somebody who commits a terrible crime under the age of 25 essentially doesn't get any punishment because their rights are supreme. But what that means, the flip side of that is that the victim doesn't seem to have any rights at all. Now, there's a book I want to recommend here. It's called Acid Attack, and it was written by Russell Finlay. Now, it was written several years back. Russell Finlay is now the leader of the Scottish Conservatives in Holyrood. So I think he's essentially, is he the leader of the opposition? I'm not sure which party currently is more popular, Conservative or Labour in Scotland. But anyway, I'm not promoting any political affiliation, but I think that's an excellent book. Because it talks about Russell Finlay himself was the victim of an acid attack, and he writes about the criminal justice system and how it affected him personally. What he saw, it's not a pleasant read. So that's something I can recommend about victims' rights here in Scotland. Now, the Bible has lots of capital punishment for lots of sexual sins or crimes, including adultery. And why is that? Well, these crimes are considered to be treason against the family. So the thought of a parent, a husband or a wife, abandoning the family, moving away, and perhaps even starting another family with somebody else, that is a high crime in the Bible. Whereas It's very commonplace in our society, and as I said previously, no consequences. So I'm sure you can think of people who have done that exact thing, have abandoned their spouse and perhaps even their children in favour of another relationship or another lifestyle. But and we know that there are few consequences, especially not any criminal consequences, but the Bible considers that treason. Now, in the Bible, the family is significantly more important than the nation or the country or the state, however you want to put it. Significantly more important, because the Bible considers the family the absolute bedrock of a community, of how society is built. The Bible does not consider the nation state the bedrock of society. And as a consequence, treason against a country doesn't get a mention in the Bible. It's not important. So if you were to go to Russia with British state secrets to sell them to the Russians, the Bible says no crime, no punishment, and it's definitely not treason. So it's a really interesting way of looking at society, completely different from what we're used to. So now is the time to start making the societal changes needed to implement this better, more important model where the family is central. Wouldn't it be great to know that you could raise your family with literally no interference from outside influences, that your children are 100% yours, and you don't have to worry about social workers, teachers, nosy busybodies even, who might grass you up for something that they don't like? Wouldn't that be great to be completely secure in your family dynamic? Okay, well, it is possible, but it's a slow process and it's going to take decades. And the best way to do it, and this is something that I've harped on about over and over, the best way to do it is to teach your children to take responsibility. Take responsibility for what? Well, anything and everything. I'm going to talk about one example about what it means to take responsibility in society. And this is one that is often in the news, and it is homelessness. So people often see homeless people on the street, especially homeless veterans, so people who've served in the army. We've got no idea why they're homeless. People are unhappy about that. And there's lots of reasons why we should be unhappy about that, of course. But what they think is somebody should do something about that. And what they really mean is the government should do something about that. But actually, that is not how you take responsibility. Taking responsibility means I should do something about that. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that you need to go out and start your own homeless shelter. No, I'm just giving that as an example. If there is something that you can think of that you've thought the government should do something about that, it's time for you to do something about that, or instill in your children the concept of them taking responsibility. I was listening to somebody from South Africa talking about the roads in South Africa, and he was saying that Britain is about 30 years behind South Africa in this sense, that when there's potholes in the roads, the South Africans know that nothing is going to be done about that, so they fix it themselves. We, in this country, still think, yeah, somebody in the council is going to sort that. But actually, they probably won't. So we need to get to that point where we're saying, okay, well, we'll fix the potholes in the road. So, I mean, that, okay, practically that sounds something very difficult. But that's the reality of taking responsibility. So that is the answer to building a nation where the bedrock is the family and not the state, not the government. And really, it would be great to start doing that now. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you again in the next video. Thanks a lot. Bye.